Hanukkah has been, we're in the middle of that. It's the Festival of Lights. It's one of the themes that we've been singing about a little bit. So it's ongoing. It's that 8-day service. It's that 8-day festival. And again, we've been just reminded even this week of the lessons from Hanukkah that we talked a bit about last week about being dedicated to Him and His cause. That's growing more and more important for us to realize that the world may be getting more and more hostile toward God and His ways, but that makes them all the more important for us to hold on to them and keep them. Hanukkah is not really a message for a time of safety and security. So at its heart, it makes the most sense in times of turmoil, upheaval, times of oppression, persecution. Again, we talked about this extensively a bit more last week. When it's times of danger for the people of God, and whether that's from apathy on our part, compromise on our part, threat from governments on somebody else's part, that's what Hanukkah is really a message for. And we talked about this scenario last week that repeats itself throughout the Scripture, starting from the very beginning, but also significantly in the lives of the people of God, and has continued even into our day. That God has a good land. He has something that is prepared for His people, but a danger of some kind, an enemy of some kind invades, occupies the land, tries to change it, where the name of God is true and true worship of God is defiled, where the enemy begins to coerce, begins to entice, begins to force the people of God to reject God and His ways, and how many people are going to go along with it. Many people who are side by side with you in days of peace and safety. Many people who are there among the pews or sitting alongside you in times of worship. They're going to end up going along with them willingly and cooperate. And we're seeing that more and more. Where the ways of Adonai are forbidden or persecuted, where God's people who are trying to live properly, trying to live His way, are persecuted, and where we are beginning more and more to cry out for His deliverance, where we're waiting for His deliverance. And so those are the themes of Hanukkah. That's the themes of much of the people of God's experience. It's many ways what we're starting to see happen even in our own day. The question really is how do we get to moments like this? Why do we see this pattern repeating over and over again? Where do we get to this in moments of history? How are we getting to such a time as this in our day? And why are we repeating the pattern? What are the people of God to do in times and moments like this? And so this message is really about living as light in a darkened world, or as a darkening world. And we're talking about that, the importance of it, why it's becoming more and more necessary. So just kind of recapping a little bit of some of the things from Maccabees, where we learned about the setting or the situation in Hanukkah that led to the rededication of the temple. But it started out with the temple first being captured and overrun and defiled. At one point, this is chapter 1, it says, "The king who wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people," very good and noble idea, "that all should give up their particular customs. So all the Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And they removed the marks the things that set them apart as a distinct people. The circumcision, they abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil." That's back in verse 15. Verse 45 says, to forbid. This is what his purpose was. They were forbidding the burnt offerings, the sacrifices, the drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the festivals, to defile the sanctuary and even the priests. So that was the purpose. That was what the king was trying to accomplish in order to make everybody one people, which sounds like such good intentions, I mean, if you made everybody one people, everybody speaking the same language, everybody worshiping and doing the same things, believing the same things, then it's going to hopefully, in his mind, to end the strife, end the arguing, end the fighting and bickering, the things that might cause us to be in conflict with one another. So we'll all just be one big happy people. But to do that, all the things that you may hold dear, you're going to have to give up. You can no longer, you're not going to be making those decisions for yourself anymore. They're going to be making it. Somebody else, a higher authority, a government is going to be making those decisions for you. It's all for your own good, after all. It's all for your own benefit. We will be a better and a happier people if everybody will just, conform and get with the program. Is anybody hearing those kind of statements going on today? We need to unify, is what we're hearing a lot of, right? We're hearing a lot of those things. But when it comes to the things of God, remember, they're forbidding these things. They don't really want the things of God to be practiced. And that's really the ultimate goal. And it even comes to the Word of God. The books of the law that they found, they tore to pieces and they burned with fire. Wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing that in the near future. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant or anyone who adhered to the law was condemned to death by decree of the king. That's where, this is always where it goes. It will always come to this point. It may not start that way, it may sound all friendly and happy and with such great intentions, but it will always end here. And it goes on, it says, so that they would forget. This is the goal of them becoming one people. This is the goal that the enemy really has in bringing this to the people of God in order to try to get them to go along with the program, is that so that they would forget the law, the Torah of God, and they would change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. Again, the goal is that even God's people will forget that there's a different way to live and a different way to believe. And again, how is it that moments like this keep coming up over and over again? Well, there are two primary reasons for that. The first, well, you see even in the book of Revelation, really, because it's kind of giving a synopsis of the goal and the purpose and the plan of the fallen one, Satan, the enemy of God. He says, woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great rage, knowing that his time is short. Even when he was cast out, even when he lost his initial rebellion against God, he knew that his time was short. Not necessarily short in duration, but limited. Because any time where it's cut short, any time where it's limited compared to eternity, that is short. Right? If it's got an ending point on it, it's short by comparison. So he knows that his time is short. Now when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he stalked the woman who had given birth to the male child. Again, this has been the pattern since the original rebellion of the accuser. Humanity has really, once he gets thrown down to earth, in that sense, humanity has been his target all along. The people of God in particular have been his target. Anyone who remains loyal to God and his ways is a target, because that is what he himself has rejected. The accuser targets those, especially those who are essential to the redemptive plan of God, or who are the ones who are continuing to proclaim the redemptive plan of God. So if you're on that goal, if that is part of your life, if that's important to your belief, then he's going to come after you with greater intensity. So the Jewish people have been essential to that plan since the moment that God called Abraham and promised that his seed is going to bless the nations. That's been why they have been a target. The Jewish people have been a target. and it doesn't matter where they go, somebody always tries to blame the Jewish people for the problems in the world. And you see that more and more. A lot of the conspiracy theories are about the Jews who are trying to take over the world and all that kind of stuff. That is the language of the enemy. We need to understand that. So Satan thinks that, if he can just wipe the Jewish people out of existence, then God's promises can't come true, and his time won't be short after all. And so that's why they are the target. That's why you'll see anti-Semitism rising up, because Satan is really trying to wipe them out. And believers, believers in the Messiah, whether Jew or Gentile, if you proclaim the message of redemption through the blood of Messiah, you're also a problem. Because you are a reminder of the fact that his time is short. You are proclaiming a message about his defeat. And so one of the reasons why we get to places like this, while we see this pattern, why Satan tries to take over governments and nations and education systems and all these other types of things, is because he's getting to the point where he can bring a culture and a people to where they will go after and attack the people of God and anyone who claim to be holding to the redemptive plan and purpose of God. That's one of the reasons why we get here, because Satan is not going to stop trying to defeat God's plan of redemption, and he's never going to stop until the day of the Lord comes. And the second reason primarily is because basically men love darkness rather than light. We see that in John chapter 3, right after the most well-known quoted passage about God so loving the world. God loves the world, but men love darkness. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness instead of the light because their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come to the light, so that their deeds will not be exposed. So here we are at this moment, before the creator of the universe spoke, there was darkness. And the first thing that he changed was creating the light and then separating it from the darkness. It's the very first act that he did in this universe. But some people are so corrupted by sin, and they're so corrupted in their thinking, that they prefer the darkness rather than the light. They actually love the darkness. They are the ones who want to call, evil good and good evil. They want to reverse the definitions of what is pleasing and good and holy. They don't just love the darkness, they don't love where they're at, they also hate any other option. They hate actually the light, and in part because darkness fears exposure. Darkness knows that it has to flee from the light, so such people don't actually want to come into the light because they don't want their own actions revealed. Darkness likes to hide. Darkness likes to conceal and keep things secret. That's actually part of the meaning of the word. In Hebrew, it's the word chozek, which means darkness, obscurity. It's also talking about a secret place. All right? The first time it's used is Genesis 1 verse 2, where darkness was on the surface of the deep. It carries with it that connotations of things that are hidden, things that are unseen. And they, if they're hidden and they're unseen, then if you want to really see them, then you need light to shine on it. In Greek, in the New Testament, it's the word skotos, which means, again, darkness, but it also talks about darkened eyesight or blindness. And then metaphorically speaking, it says of ignorance, respecting divine things and human duties, and the accompanying ungodliness and immorality, together with their consequent misery in hell. Right? That's how that's where you would see in Strong's and such like that. But, in some ways, the only thing I would disagree with this is it's not always a matter of ignorance, is it? Sometimes it's intentional. It's Romans 1 talking about they intentionally forgot that God created the universe. So there is a rejection. So it's not always a matter of ignorance that this darkness or this the attitude toward the divine things and such. Sometimes it's a hostility and a hatred for it. Job chapter 24 says, "These are those who rebel against the light, who do not recognize its ways or stay in its paths." All right? Can you imagine being in the dark, where you're wandering around in the field and somebody has, those nice little solar lights that you have, they've created a nice little walkway through all of this, through the marsh or through all these other different places. They've created this nice pathway for people to walk on, but they refuse to walk on it. And they have no idea what they're stepping into. That's kind of the picture that is here. They refuse, they rebel against the path, the safe path that has been laid out for them. And they'll step on anything else before they step on the path of God. They do not recognize its way or stay in its path. In Proverbs, people who love God and who love the light are supposed to call upon and ask for wisdom, right? That's one of the things in Proverbs. We ask for wisdom, and it's to help us to stay off the path of evil and darkness. This is Proverbs chapter 2, verse 12. It talks about to deliver you from the way of evil. That's what wisdom is supposed to be for. To deliver his people from the way of evil, from those speaking perverse things, who leave the straight paths to walk in ways of darkness. There actually are ways of darkness that people can walk on, and who rejoice in doing wrong and delight in the perversity of evil, whose paths are crooked and are devious in their ways. If you are wise, you're not going to want to have anything to do with that stuff. But the wisdom of God is what to the perspective of the world? As Corinthians, it's foolishness to the world. The wisdom of God is foolishness. The strength of God is foolishness. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who do not believe. And so instead, they'll speak perverse things. They will walk in the ways of darkness. They rejoice in the doing of the wrong things. They'll delight in perversity of evil. They'll take those crooked paths and they'll be devious in everything we do, and they do. Are we seeing that in our day? Are we seeing crooked and devious paths that people are taking?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. We're seeing a lot of that. Matthew chapter 18 talks about darkness. In describing it, he says, into the outer darkness, in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's what is out there in the darkness. That is what some people really love, that are so rebellious against the things of God. They would rather be in a place with weeping and gnashing of teeth than be in the light of God. Luke chapter 22, it says, every day I was with you in the temple, yet you did not lay a finger on me. This is Yeshua talking. But this is yours, the hour and the power of darkness. All right, so the hour and the power of darkness, is really opposed to Yeshua, is opposed to the Messiah, is opposed to everything that the Messiah is trying to accomplish. That's what the power of darkness wants to do. That's why they come to him and try to arrest him. That's why they try to put an end to this redemptive plan by thinking that if we just kill him, it'll be over. Ephesians chapter 5 puts it like this. He says, "Take no part in the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is disgraceful even to mention the things that are done by them in secret." Again, you see how darkness and things that are hidden, things that are secret, are kept together. But, in the things that people are accomplishing in the darkness are fruitless. All right? They have nothing in the darkness that will not survive into eternity. Fruitless are those things that are fruitful are those things that are accomplished for the kingdom of God. Fruitful are those things that will survive the refining fire. Everything that is not of God, is sin. When we may be saved, but it's through the fire. And all of our deeds, all of our works that are not for His kingdom and for His glory, those might be lost. And only those things that are glorifying Him will remain. So there are deeds that we could be taking part of and part in, but they are fruitless. That doesn't mean they don't accomplish things here in this world. That doesn't mean they don't achieve goals and purposes here in this world. But when it comes to the eternal things, they will end. Their time is short as well. Fruitless deeds are short in time. Kingdom deeds are eternal and much longer. And so these things are disgraceful. We as the people of God are even to expose these things that are done. Aren't there a lot of people praying for exposing going on right about now? That all of the conniving ways, all of the potential for falsehood and deceit be exposed. That's what we hope to see. But it's disgraceful even to mention the things that are done in secret, because they're disgraceful because they do not honor the Lord. It goes on. Hello. It's in there twice. I guess you needed to see that more than once. 1 John, verse 1, says, "If we say we have fellowship with Him and keep walking in the darkness, we are lying and do not practice the truth." All right, this is for those, we talked about that pattern, that there's going to be a lot of people who go along with it. A lot of people who even who claim to be in the body of Messiah, who are fellowshipping beside us. And they're going to willingly go along with some of these changes, some of these patterns, some of these things that are called upon them. And we need to understand that that is walking in the darkness. When you're leaving behind the things of God, when you are leaving behind Him and His ways, you are walking in darkness. And if you're walking in darkness and you're leaving behind those distinctiveness, the distinctions that mark you and set you apart as the people of God, then you are walking in darkness and you don't really have relationship with Him. You're not in fellowship with Him. It is not possible to say we have fellowship with Him and yet walk in the dark. We are liars. And we are not practicing the truth. Again, this is Isaiah chapter 5. He says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who present darkness as light and light as darkness, who present bitter as sweet and sweet as..." Again, we're trying to be told, all these definitions of things are up in the air right now. Doing and practicing the things of God is being called selfish. It's being called wrong. It's being called is being neglected or frowned upon or discouraged by government. Even government officials are saying you should not do that, you should not practice that, you should not believe that. And so they are trying to turn the good things of God into evil, into things that everybody should be ashamed of. Again, God's pronouncement of that is, woe to them that do that. They may not see kind of consequences in their life right now, but the judgment of God is going to be meted out upon them in all those things. And when we're talking about, we're seeing all of these things happening in our day and in our time. We see these things increasing. We see these things more and more. We see it as a sign that we're getting closer and closer to the end of days. And know that that's also part of the prophecy. That's also part of what we know is coming. Understand this. This is 2 Timothy 3. That in the last days, hard times will come. So nothing of what we're seeing right now should be of any surprise to us. We should not be shocked by it at all. Nor should we despair by it. But he says, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, and unholy, hard-hearted, unforgiving, backbiting, without self-control, brutal, hating what is good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to an outward form of godliness but denying its power. And he goes on to say, avoid people like that. Again, are we seeing this increasing in our day? Yes. Again, this is not a shock. We are seeing all of this transpire, and it seems to be accelerating. You see this on the left, you see this on the right. Because even both sides of that spectrum, you have people who reject God. Maybe for different reasons, but they do. They don't want to be limited by the ways of God, because they can get more power, more money, more pleasure. These are the ways of darkness that it's talking about. And men love darkness rather than light. Again, the enemy of our souls is not going to stop opposing God and His ways until the day that the Lord returns. And people are going to want to go along with that. This is Maccabees again, verse 13. Some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. That's within the story leading up to the events of the dedication of the temple, the rededication of Hanukkah. This is why that pattern repeats over and over again. This is why we're seeing it again, even in our day. But the great thing about this pattern is that Messiah is the cure. God does not let this pattern go on forever. You see that back in John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through Him, and apart from Him nothing was made that has come into being. Again, this is talking about creation. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overpowered it. We never need to lose sight of this truth. Regardless of how dark things get, regardless of how bad things get, or we see things coming, or all of our fears and all the things that we worry about, we should never lose this truth, that the darkness has not overpowered the ways of God and who He is and what He is doing. We see it again, it shows up even in John chapter 8. Yeshua spoke to them again saying, I am the light of the world. He is that light. Just like the Word of God was spoken and sent light into the darkness at creation, Messiah, the Word of God, was sent as light into a dark world to do all the same things that light is supposed to do, to expose sin and reveal it, to redeem those who are trapped in darkness, and to show the path to show the halakha, to show the new way to walk. When you talk about exposure, 1 Corinthians 4, it says, "Therefore do not judge anything before the time. Wait until the Lord comes, and He will bring to light the things hidden in darkness, and also make clear the motives of the heart." All right? Darkness has not overpowered it. Darkness is not getting away with things. Even if it seems to, in our eyes, from our perspective, in our day or in the immediate moment, He's going to bring all this stuff to light. And we can pray and hope that it happens quickly. But never lose sight of the fact that whether it happens quickly or not, we can be right before Him, because He is going to expose the things that are hidden in darkness. So that's one of the verses about the exposing of sin. We talk about redemption. This is Colossians chapter 1. He says, "We give thanks to the Father who qualified you to share in the inheritance of the Kedoshim, the saints, in the light." We don't normally, naturally qualify to share in that. That's not in our sin nature. We don't qualify to share in the inheritance that is in the light. We have to be made to qualify. We have to be changed in such a way that we would qualify. He says, and how He does it is He rescued us from the domain of darkness. We need to be rescued. We're trapped there, and we cannot escape on our own, by our own power. We are rescued from the domain of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son, whom He loves, and in Him we have redemption, the release of sins. This is what the enemy is trying to prevent. This is what the enemy has been fighting against all along. He does not want us to be rescued from darkness. He wants to keep us right there in the dark, in chains, under His power, under His authority. Again, Yeshua, we also talked about Him showing the halakha, showing the path and the way that we should live. Yeshua spoke to them again, "I am the light of the world." Right? We just read that. "But the one who follows me will no longer walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." He is showing us the path that we should go. But again, those who love the dark, who love that evil, who rebel against the light, don't want to step on this path, and they resent and hate anybody who does. Right? Yeshua comes so that we may no longer walk in darkness. Yeshua comes to shine a light upon our path. Messiah is the light. When you look at that word in the Hebrew, it's the word or, and it can be a noun or a verb. As a noun, it's talking about light, the light of day, light, the dawn, lightning, or something that is bright. But it also functions as a verb, where it's to be or become light and to shine, to cause to shine, to enlighten or illumine. So Messiah is the light. Yeshua is the light.
Every tribe, every tongue, Emmanuel, your King shall come, endure sorrows and love pain.
Is it still working? Who knew we were going to break out into song right there in the middle of the message? But, Messiah is the light. He's the noun. He is the light itself. And then He calls, or He causes His people to be the light. He causes us to shine. So He is fulfilling both the noun and the verb form of the idea of being light. We reflect His glory. We shine His light. As Messiah shines into the darkness, so should we. How we must be the light in an ever-increasing darkness in this world around us. Matthew chapter 5, He says, He also calls us, His people, We are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Not because we're the noun, but because he has done the verb on us. He has made us. He has caused us to shine. He has made us light. Remember, we were in darkness. We were under the domain of darkness. We don't have the light in and of ourselves, but he causes us to shine. And so we can be the light of the world. He says, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on a lampstand so that it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men so they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Right. Our light in an ever-increasing darkness of the world, our light is supposed to shine before men, before human beings, all people. And is it the people who are already in the light with us? Is it the people who are already on the path of God's ways? The ones that we agree with that we're supposed to shine before? The ones that we're safe around that we're supposed to shine before? Not at all. We are supposed to shine before all people who are still walking in the darkness. And that means we're going to be shining before people who hate the fact that we are the light. We're going to be shining before people who rebel and refuse to walk in the path of light through the darkness. We are supposed to join the mission even of the Jewish people, where he talks about them being a light to the nations, a light to the Gentiles. We're shining the light. We're not supposed to hide it under a basket. We're not supposed to quit meeting together, for example, as some are being told to do. We're supposed to shine the light. But many love the darkness. Many others don't even know anything but darkness. That's all they've ever been in. They don't even know that there is another way to live. And as the day of the Lord approaches, as the darkness deepens, as lawlessness increases and the love of many grows cold, we can't go into shelter mode as the people of God. We can't go into secret mode as much as we might be inclined to. Because when we do that, that also helps the darkness pretend that we're not really there at all. That's one thing we need to keep in mind. As long as we go into hiding, we take our lamp and put it under a basket, we need to realize that, hey, the darkness is being like, see, they're gone. They're not even here. We must not let our light be hidden. We must allow it to shine. And we're going to be tempted on that issue. We're going to be struggle on that issue. You know, it's going to be harder and harder to shine and not meet in secret. I mean, there's a lot of places where they do. And yet, somehow or another, the word still gets out and people still come. Even though they are meeting in secret, maybe not even the same location from week to week, the word still gets out. Our light is supposed to shine. He says in Romans chapter 13, he says, besides this you know the time, that it is already the hour for you to awaken from sleep. See, when the time is getting closer, that's not the time to lessen or retract or pull back or go to sleep. That's the time for us to truly wake up. For now, because right now, it's in times of safety, it's in the times where everything is going good, where you're protected, that's when you're inclined to take a nap and sleep. And the people of God have been asleep in this country for quite some time. Yeah. For what we should be doing and what should be most important to us. We have been asleep. Because it's like what happened with Thanksgiving for many of you. You know, you go in You have your freedom, you have your meal, you eat up all that turkey, you get all nice and full, and then what do you want to do? Go right out. So these times come, and they wake up the people of God. These times are supposed to wake us up out of our slumber and cause us to shine all the brighter. He says, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first came to faith, first came to trust. The night is almost gone, and the day is near. So let us put off the works of darkness. All the more we are supposed to put off the works of darkness and then put on the armor of light. I mean, have y'all seen those pictures of those images of a knight in shining armor? Y'all heard that phrase before? Is somebody like that supposed to be secret, or are they trying to get noticed? They want to be noticed. They want to be seen in that shining armor, because that represents, in those days at least, it represented the authority of the king. It represented that they can walk about freely and not fear the darkness. We are supposed to put on the armor of light. Even in the darkness times, even as all of these things are increasing, man, you're going to need your armor more, but it's going to need to shine all the more. Let us walk properly as in the day. Let us walk properly. So that's what we are supposed to do as the people of God. Our light is to shine by our commitment to God and His ways. As His ways are more and more degraded, as His ways are more and more shamed, as His ways are more and more made illegal or frowned upon, then our commitment to them needs to increase. We saw that again in Maccabees. Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice to all of these decrees and all of the offers. He had been essentially bribed and offered to make his life a whole lot easier, a whole lot better, a whole lot wealthier. He says, even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons, as for me and my house, right? And my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. Far be it from us to desert the Torah, the law, and the ordinances. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion, our faith, to the right hand or to the left. Because you can do that. Satan doesn't care which way you go. He doesn't care if you go off to the right. He doesn't care if you go off to the left. He just cares that you go off the path. And we have a lot of people in the body of Messiah that are going in both directions, and they think that those on the left are going to save them. The political left are going to save them, and there are those of us that are going off to the right and think that the political right is going to save us. Guess what? Neither one of them are going to do that.
Isaiah 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will light their own firebrands.
They'll light, yeah, absolutely. So neither one of them are our salvation. Only the ways and the path of God that is lit by His light and His ways. That is the only thing that will save the people of God. And so even as the world makes it harder, our light has got to shine brighter. And we need to put off those fruitless deeds of darkness, carousing, drunkenness, promiscuity, strife, and envy. That's one of the passages that we read about earlier. We didn't, if we kept going in that, the Romans passage. But Colossians chapter 3 puts it like this. He says, therefore, put to death what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, and greed, for that is idolatry. These are all things that the world is trying to encourage. Right? Mm-hmm. The world wants these things to increase. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. But again, that's the darkness. He says, but now set them all aside, anger, rage, malice, slander, and foul language out of your mouth. Are those things increasing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Hostility, division, anger, rage is increasing. He even says, do not lie to one another. After all, you have taken off the old self with its practices. You know, this light is getting rid of this stuff in the believer, in the life of the disciple. And this light that shines, on one hand, is supposed to attract those who want to be rescued from darkness. That's one reason why they need to see that there is a different way. There is something different about you that does not do all of these things and go along with all of these things that everybody else seems to be a part of. Set those things aside. And some people will realize, you know what? I don't want to have those things in my life either. I need the light to come and shine in my heart, in my life. But as this light attracts some people from that path of darkness, it's also going to draw the ire, even the punishment of those who love the darkness. Our light is to shine despite that. Our light is to shine in the way we love one another. You know, the world is supposed to know that we are His disciples by what? Our love for one another. And even the way we talk about each other. The kind of things that we say. Are we lying to each other? Are we lying about each other? Are we condemning and criticizing each other all the time? Boy, sometimes we are the worst at criticizing other people who claim the name of Christ. There's a difference between criticizing and wanting to truly seek correction and getting people on the right path. He goes on in Colossians to say this. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, you put off your old self. He says, then clothe yourselves in tender compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. If anyone has a grievance against another, just as the Lord you, so also you must pardon others. This is that path. By these, the world will know that we are His disciples. This is love for one another. This is shining our light into darkness. This is the opposite of darkness. He goes on. It says, but above all these things put on love, which is the bond of perfect harmony. That's what we need most of all. We shouldn't expect to get praise from the darkness that the world is offering. We shouldn't really want their praise because they're going to praise us for doing all the things that they want us to do. We need to look for the praise of God. We need to put on love. We need to unite together around the things of God. The perfect bond of harmony. He says, let the shalom, the peace of Messiah, rule in your heart. And to this shalom you were surely called in one body. See, there is a unity that is supposed to be and supposed to mark the people of God. It's not the one that the world is promising or asking for or demanding. Again, you're hearing calls for unity. But they don't mean this kind of unity. They mean unity in rejecting God and His ways. We are called to put on this love. We are called to put on this unity as the body and to be even thankful. Because you know what so often happens, the increasing darkness causes those who bear the light to come together. He says, let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another with all wisdom in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with gratitude in your heart to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Yeshua, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. This is going to be essential. As the darkness increases, we need His Word, because His Word is the light. We need it to dwell in us in abundance. We need its teaching. We need its admonishing. We need the encouraging words of each other that we'll find in the Psalms, in the writings, in the even songs of faith. And we never want to lose that thanksgiving, that gratitude, that we are walking in the light. Whatever we do, we need to give it over to Him. Our compassion, our love, our commitment to Him and His ways. You know, we got to realize it's not going to be our political party. It's not going to be our tax philosophy. It's not going to be any of those things that should mark the people of God. It's these things that should mark the people of God. Because all of these things that we look to in turning to the left or turning to the right, all of those things are eventually going to turn on the people of God. Because the powers of this world, the ones who love the power, love the authority, love the wealth, love all of those things, that essentially love darkness, they may get there in a different path, but they're going to get to the same place where they're going to eventually turn on the people of God because they love darkness rather than light, and they will fall in line with the Antichrist and his authority. That's what's going to happen. We should know and understand that. But we as the people of God cannot fall into that pattern and cannot go on that same path. We must be the light. You know, we've got to shine with love and compassion. We've got to shine with power and conviction. We've got to shine even to expose sin. And it's okay to pray for exposure. We've got to shine to redeem those that are held captive in darkness. And we need to shine the light of the Word on the halakha, the way, the path that we should walk. And in the midst of all of this, in the midst of all the pressure, all the temptation, all the offers, all the threats, we need to shine even brighter. And we need to shine even bolder. And we need to shine even clearer. That is going to be more and more essential for the people of God. And that is so much of what the message of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, is about. That we are called to be the light of the world. So we don't join in with all of the lawlessness that is going on, but instead live for the things of God in all things, at all times, in all places.